Welcome to Unbelievable Stories. Today's story is full of shocking twists and real drama. Subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's dive in. It's been 5 years since my divorce from Julia was made official. We had been married for almost 18 years before things fell apart. We were together since college and tied the knot right after finishing school. Back then, we had only been with each other. There's something special about that. Love means more than just physical stuff. Sadly, you only see it when it's too late. We had a pretty good life. We had 4 kids together: Sophie, Leo, Lily, and Ethan. We called them the alphabet kids. After Ethan was born, I had a vasectomy because I didn't want the whole alphabet. Sophie and Leo are in high school now, but Lily and Ethan still live with Julia, my ex-wife. What happened? What went wrong? We seemed to be a happy family. We were good parents and supported everything our kids did. We were like most young couples, struggling to make ends meet. I worked at a tech company, and Julia started working at the local Costco once the 2 older kids started school. The younger kids started in daycare when one of us wasn't home to watch them. It wasn't the greatest thing to do, but in today's society, that's how it goes. I often wonder how my parents and grandparents were able to do it with the women not working. I don't know whether to blame society or materialism. We wanted a lot of things and we wanted them too fast. Our love life started off great, like probably most young people. We did it all the time, day or night. As the kids were born, we did it less and less. It's probably that way with most families. We just didn't have the time, or so we thought. Looking back, the problem was us. We started taking each other for granted. Our love life became a hurry-up and wait. We reached our climaxes, but it was nothing like the days of old the sweat and I love you so much type of sex. In a sense, I guess it became boring, but only because we didn't put the love in it where it belonged. I eventually got a promotion to manager. Our financial situation became much better. As the kids became older, we were able to go out once in a while. Dinner and a movie were enjoyable. It started to put a little of the luster back into our somewhat boring relationship. I guess all marriages go through it. You love each other but take each other for granted. Julia came home one day and said she wanted to go out with the other girls at work. I didn't see any problem with that since our kids were now old enough to take care of themselves. This happened about 4 years ago. Julia got dressed in slacks and a blouse. She looked nice. She was like a lot of women, always worried about her weight, but she always seemed to look nice at any weight. When she got home, I asked her if she had a nice time. She told me she did and about some of the other girls. I have nothing against Costco, but a lot of the women that worked there were divorced and separated. It didn't seem like the type of people that Julia should be partying with. I told her so, and she got mad at me for downgrading her friends. I did no such thing. I told her it's just that these women will look for men, and you'd be there with them. She looked at me a little sheepish. We were together for 18 years. I knew all her moods. Well, did you dance with any men? I asked. She delayed in answering me but then said, I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, I danced with a couple of guys and that was all. I knew a little more happened but didn't push the issue right then. She told me that she and her friends were going to go out once a month. I wasn't really happy with it, but what could I really say? I would have to just wait and see. The following month, she wore a skirt with pantyhose. I watched her get dressed. She didn't say much to me. I told her that I would be waiting up for her. It was past midnight when she came in. She looked at me and started to go to the room to change. As she started toward the bedroom, I asked her, when you left, you had pantyhose on. Where are they? It was hot, and I took them off, was all she said. Julia, this is starting to get out of hand. We need to talk, I said. She asked me to leave the room so she could undress. I told her that she had undressed in front of me for 18 years and wanted to know what was so special about that night. I walked up to her and grabbed her by the arm, something I had never done before. Please don't, Ryan. I beg you, please don't. She knew what I was about to do. As I reached under her skirt and found her bare legs, she started crying as I pushed her away. Well, I guess that answers why no pantyhose, doesn't it? I remarked. I'm sorry, Ryan. It just happened. I was drinking at this party, and James kept telling me how beautiful I was, and then he kissed me and began touching me. I've never been with anyone but you, Ryan. The girls kept telling me how good James is, and I let it happen. No one man came that much in you. You had more than one man, didn't you? I asked. When James took me, I was lying on the bed, and a couple of other guys came in and took advantage of me also. They didn't take you let them all screw you. Doesn't our marriage mean anything to you? Didn't you at least think about me or the kids? Ryan, I'm sorry. It wasn't love like you and I have. It was raw sex, and I liked it. Emma, one of the other girls, is married, and she told me she and her husband are into swapping. I don't want to lose you, Ryan. Please come with me one time and try it, she begged. I needed to think. My mind was going in 100 different directions. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore right then. My mind didn't comprehend what just happened. I told her we could talk the next day. I would sleep on the couch that night. In the morning, after the kids left, I got dressed and went to work. Julia was still sleeping from her hard night. I couldn't keep my mind on my job and took the afternoon off. I went where Julia was working and walked up to her. She smiled at me. She was a cashier that day, and at the next register was her friend Emma. I had read the name on her name tag. Honey, how come you're not at work? Her friend Emma kept eyeing me. I'm going to see Lucas, our lawyer, today. I'm getting a divorce. I turned around and walked out. Behind me, I heard Julia yelling at me to wait. She had a customer at the register and wasn't sure what to do. I guess she was in panic mode. I didn't wait. I walked briskly out the door, got in my truck, and left. I went straight to the house and packed most of my clothing. I threw it all into boxes and put it in the truck. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew where I didn't want to be. I did leave a note for my kids. I told them that their mother and I were getting a divorce and she could explain it to them. I really would like to know how she was going to explain this one, probably make it my fault. She was good at blaming me for most things. I ended up going to my parents' house. They were in their 60s and had been married over 40 years. I told them that Julia and I were separating and would probably get divorced. I know it hurt them because they really liked Julia, and this was probably a shock. I told them I needed a place to stay, and they offered me the whole basement. It was all remodeled and had a nice bedroom and even a small kitchenette and living room set up down there. They told me I could stay as long as I needed. They didn't much use the basement anymore. They didn't like the stairs. About 2 years ago, they moved the washer and dryer upstairs after Mom's hip replacement. I might ramble on a little while telling you this story. There's so much to tell you. I know you want to know about Julia and what the kids thought, as well as input from the lawyer and a few other people. I told Mom and Dad that Julia wanted more freedom. It was kind of hard to explain that she wanted to have sex with other people. I didn't want to tell my parents that. I just told them that we felt differently about a number of things and didn't think we could come to an agreement. They weren't happy with that explanation, but it was all I could tell them for now. I did make it over to Lucas, our lawyer, and he told me that Julia had already called twice. I asked him if he was going to represent me or her. She doesn't want a divorce, Ryan. She thinks you can work this out. Answer my question, Lucas. Are you her lawyer or mine? I asked again. I'm hers, Ryan. She called me first, and I accepted the case. I'm sorry. If you would have called me, I would have been yours. Please talk with her, Ryan. You are both my friends, and I hate seeing you two in divorce court. Did she tell you why I walked out, Lucas? Why I want a divorce? I asked. She said you two had an argument about her going out, she got drunk, and cheated on you, he replied. Truth time, Lucas. She went out after I told her I had a bad feeling about it. She screwed 3 men and then asked me if I wanted to swap with her friends. There's your case, Lucas. And going to see Sarah Wright. We both know she's the best in the business. They'll have her call you as soon as we get a plan together. Thanks for nothing, Lucas. I turned around and walked out. Sarah was the best divorce lawyer in the state. She was as hard-nosed as they come. I knew a few men who went against her, and they were all taken to the cleaners. I called Sarah, and she gave me an appointment for the next day. She told me not to talk to Julia until we had our meeting. I asked her about the kids, and she told me to have my parents call them and tell them we would talk in the next couple of days. My parents did call the kids and talk to Sophie, our oldest. They told Sophie that I would call them and talk to them in the next few days. They mentioned that if any of the kids had an emergency, they could call them also, and that I would be staying at their house. About 2 hours later, Julia called the house. She told my dad she needed to talk to me. I shook my head no, and my dad said that my lawyer advised not to talk to her that day. He said I would call her after meeting with my lawyer. I heard my dad say to Julia, "Julia, I don't know what happened between you two, but you must have hurt Ryan terribly. I've never seen him like this." He talked a little more and hung up the phone. He looked over at me and said, "Julia told me to tell you she loves you and not to do this to your family." I was pissed. I knew she was going to throw it in my lap and make it my fault. My mom was out of the room, so I told my dad the truth. I told him not to tell Mom because it would crush her. She loved Julia. He had tears in his eyes when he left the room. My dad was a pretty sentimental guy. I had to go to work the next day. I wasn't allowed to accept personal calls in the plant except for emergencies. I told my manager about applying for a divorce and to make sure no calls were forwarded from Julia as emergencies. I was glad to be working. It kept my mind focused on something other than Julia. I met with Sarah after work. She was a beautiful lady but pretty much all business. "Ryan, what do you want to happen here?" she asked. "Wow, I guess I'm not really sure. You see, I love Julia, I really do, and probably always will. I don't want to destroy her or anything like that. I just can't live with the lifestyle she wants. Am not into sharing her, and am not interested in having sex with just anybody. I am somewhat worried about the kids. I know they're older, but I don't want her bringing every James, Dick, and Harry to the house. Although I don't think she would do such a thing, but I didn't think she would cheat on me either." Sarah spoke. "Ryan, people go through this every day. We can do whatever you want. I take it you don't want the affair situation publicly known for the sake of the kids. You need to support them, and we can pretty much dictate the amount you can give or take, whatever you want. You're in the driver's seat here. We might have to use the affair as a weapon to get things settled, but we'll go for irreconcilable differences in the end. Is that all right with you? You're my lawyer." "I'll follow your advice," I replied. "You make a pretty hefty salary now. Since she is working, we probably can get away with $600 a week in child support. As the kids turn 21, we'll knock off about $70 a week. No spousal support, and when all the kids are over 21, the money stops. You'll also be responsible for their medical expenses. As far as their education, it's up to you if you want to supply any. You don't have to legally. Your oldest is 17, and your youngest is 12, so you'll have to pay some support for the next 7 years. Do you want to go with this, or do you want something else? What about our savings and my retirement package? All the savings will be divided equally, as well as any bills that are in both of your names. You have 2 vehicles, so you can each have one. Your retirement is exactly that, your retirement. We won't let her touch that. The house and furnishings are the only things left. What would you like done with them? Our house is worth about $270,000, and we owe about $70,000. But my kids live there. I'm not sure what to do," I said. "I have an idea to throw at you. In many cases like yours where you're not after revenge and there are kids involved, I suggest that you let her have the house to live in until the children are all grown and out of the house, say age 21 for an example. At that time, the house will be sold and the money divided equally, or one of the 2 parties can buy the house at half the worth minus what's owed on it. She will be responsible for half the house payment. There's so much to go through. Why wasn't I enough for her? 17 years down the drain. I guess we can go with that. What if either Julia or Lucas want to fight it?" I asked. "Then we pull out the big guns and bring up the cheating. I'm pretty sure they don't want that. If they do, then we'll ask for custody and a 7,070 split of everything, and of course, no support since she won't have the kids." I took the next day off, and Sarah called Lucas and told him that she had an offer for him and Julia and asked if they could be at her office at noon. Of course, Lucas barked about coming to Sarah's office but agreed to it, knowing it was a no-win situation for him. Lucas and Julia showed up at the same time. I figured Lucas told her to wait for him in the parking lot. There we were at the table, Sarah and me on one side and Lucas and Julia on the other. Lucas spoke first. He knew Sarah and wasn't happy about being on the opposite side. "Nice to see you again, Sarah. I know how you operate and like to get down to business. Before you make us an offer, Julia would like to talk privately with Ryan. No, I said. She did her talking the other night. I will talk to her only after the papers are signed. Everyone here is aware of why I'm asking for the divorce. I looked directly at Julia. If you're afraid of having your love life exposed, please listen to my offer. I think it is most generous. Sarah said, well, that question was answered. Mrs. Brown, Ryan has made you a very fair offer. Sarah handed a copy to Julia and one to Lucas. He will use irreconcilable differences for the reason for separation. As you can see, he has given you a decent income while your children are living at home. The only debatable issue here is the house. I think Ryan has been very fair in his offer here also. Lucas spoke again. We need time to look over this document and see about a possible counteroffer, Sarah. I will talk with Julia and get back to you in the next couple of days. Lucas, just so we are clear on the issue, there will be no counteroffer. If you turn this offer down, which I believe would be very ill-advised, Mr. Brown will file under adultery and ask for custody of the kids and the house. Julia looked up and was crying. Sarah was playing hardball, and it hurt me to see Julia cry. Julia grabbed a pen and asked where to sign without even reading it. She was crying full-fledged tears then. She was afraid of losing her kids. Mrs. Brown, please calm down, replied Sarah. Ryan doesn't want to hurt you or the kids. Please take a day or so, as Lucas has suggested, and see if everything is agreeable. Maybe we have overlooked something. I'm sorry about my threatening tone, but I wanted to make it clear that we are offering a very good settlement here. Ryan is seeing to it that you and your kids are well taken care of, so please take the document and discuss it with your lawyer, and Lucas and I will discuss it tomorrow. Sarah handed her a tissue box. Julia took a couple of tissues and looked at me while her crying lessened some. Ryan, I do love you, no matter what you think. I was just hoping that we could put some time between us and maybe get back together, but I see that you have already made your decision. No, Julia, you made my decision for me. You want the freedom to do as you please, and I'm giving it to you. The only thing I ask is that you keep your lovers away from my kids, or I'll take them from you. That's a promise. Julia started crying again as she hurried out of the building. Lucas said goodbye to us and told Sarah he would probably see her tomorrow or the next day. Sarah looked at me and told me it looked like I would win this case. I told her there are no winners, only losers. I lost the only woman I ever loved, and my kids now live in a single-parent home. No, we didn't win. We just got a fair agreement. My daughter Sophie drove the two youngest over to my parents to see me. I was happy to see them. They kept asking questions, and I kept telling them that their mom and I weren't getting along and we didn't see eye to eye on some major issues, so we would be getting divorced. I tried to explain to them that their mother and I would always be in their lives. We just wouldn't be together. Ethan, I will be at your games. I wouldn't miss them. And Lily, when volleyball season gets here, I'll be in the stands rooting for you. I will always be part of your lives. I hugged and kissed them all as they told me how much they loved me. I gave them my cell phone number, and of course, they could always call me at Grandma's house. Leo showed up a little later. Dad, I have a question for you. Did you cheat on Mom? No, Leo. I would never cheat on your mother. Why would you ask me that? Well, Jim, my buddy at school, and Travis, our neighbor, said their parents are divorced, and in both cases, their dad was caught cheating on their mom. I was hoping you didn't do something like that. God, I love you, Dad, and am going to miss you. Leo, you won't be missing me. I'm not leaving the country. I'll always be here for all you kids. It will just take some time getting used to our situation. Well, the divorce was finalized, and I kept my promise to the kids. I went to most of their school functions. I saw Julia at most of them. She was a good mom, and if she was having any affairs, she was keeping it very private. I might mention here that Julia and I were always on speaking terms. We got together for the kids' birthdays and other special occasions. The only agreement we had was she wasn't to mention her dating life to me. We talked about the kids' holidays. My parents' no topic was off limits but her love life. A couple of times she started to say something about a male friend or something along those lines, and I would get up and leave. The agreement that Sarah and I wrote up we all signed. I wasn't there when Julia came in to sign it. Sarah told me Julia took it pretty hard. We had a few arguments with Lucas on what credit cards would be paid and by whom. I guess that was his way of saving face. I told Sarah that if push came to shove, I would pay them. We cancelled all our credit cards and had new ones issued in separate names. I talked with the kids regularly. They told me that their mom accepted the fact that we were divorced and seemed a little happier. I asked them if she dated, and they told me no. She did go out with girlfriends about once a month. I think I cringed when I heard that. I never did have that heart-to-heart with Julia. She wanted the freedom to explore, and that wasn't my thought in life. You don't marry someone and decide to find new attractions. It was the way I was brought up. As I mentioned, my parents were married over 40 years. Maybe we did get married too early, and she didn't get a chance for whatever it is she is seeking. I never explored the sexual realm either. I was happy with Julia. Going back a couple of years, I should mention that I did start dating again. I went out with a few women from work. At my age, most women I met and dated were divorced. I made it a point never to date a married woman, even if she was separated. I guess it's something I felt inside. I did have sex with a few of these ladies. It just wasn't the same for me. I mean, it was good, and I treated them all with respect, but I always thought about Julia. It's funny how you can't just shake it off and go on with your life. I tried, believe me, I really tried. All the women I dated just didn't do it for me. My best days were the family events when I could see Julia. One night last year, I went out with the guys from work. They said they knew a lively bar where the women hung out. Of course, you know who I saw there. It must have been ladies' night out. I looked up, and there she sat. It was funny though, because there weren't any men around them yet. I didn't know any of the women she was with. The only one I ever met from her work was Emma, and she wasn't there. I walked up to Julia from the side, so she didn't see me coming. "Would you like to dance?" I asked. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" she asked. "Just out with the guys." "Are you waiting for someone, or do you want to dance?" I replied. No, I'm not waiting for anyone, and yes, I would love to dance with you. Let me introduce you to my friends. She rattled off a half-dozen names and then said, "These women all belong to our book club. About once every 6 months, we go out instead of meeting at someone's house, and it just happens to be tonight. Now, how about that dance?" We went up to the dance floor, and I held her in my arms. "Just like old times, isn't it?" I said. She looked up and smiled as I pulled her tighter. We had 2 slow numbers in a row, and then the band started a fast one. I never could dance to those types of songs, I said as I walked her back to her table. She seemed sad that I took her to the table. "Ladies, it was nice meeting you. I better get back to my friends." As I walked away, it just didn't seem right. I didn't want to see if she was approached by another man. I told my friends that I had to leave and would see them later. As I walked out the door, I turned and saw Julia staring at me. The next day, I got a call from her. She said it was nice to see me out and about and enjoyed being with me. She asked me if I would help plan Sophie's wedding reception. My oldest daughter was going to get married. It seemed like just yesterday I held her in my arms. Now here she was, ready to start her life with her boyfriend. It's funny Julia called the day after I had seen her. Since I knew Sophie's wedding was a year away, I told her I thought it was a bit early since it was so far away. She told me that reservations and such have to be made way in advance. I suggested she give Sophie a call and make the plans with her. After all, it was her wedding. After they got their ideas on paper, I would look at the financial end. She said that was okay and she would give Sophie a call and get things started. I wanted Julia to know that one dance does not put us back together. I called her about a month later to ask her how the plans were coming along. Lily answered the phone and said that Julia had gone out with friends. I was aggravated but really had no right to be. We've been divorced for over 2.5 years now. I did ask Lily if her mom went out regularly, and she told me about once a month. I called my buddy Steve and asked him if he wanted to go to the bar. He was divorced also, and enjoyed the ladies. We walked in, and the place was crowded. I saw Julia sitting with a group of people, both men and women. I decided to hell with her, I was going to find another woman to dance with. I saw this young lady, probably around 28. She was dressed really sexy with a mini skirt on and braless. Steve said, "Damn, now that's nice. Check out those gals sitting by themselves." The gals were seated with some other women who were dressed about the same. They were only a couple of tables away from Julia and her friends. I was walking in the direction of Julia's table when she spotted me. Her mouth kind of flew open, and I walked right past her table to the table with the sexy young chick. "Care to dance?" I asked her. "Sure, I like older men, especially good-looking ones," she replied. I knew she said it loud enough that Julia heard her. We got up, and I held her close. I wasn't holding her hand but had my arms around her, and had her body tight against me. "I'm Ryan, and you are a very lovely woman." I was dancing almost in front of Julia's table. "I'm Rachel, and it's nice to meet you, Ryan." I kept her close and tried not to look at Julia. The men at Julia's table were staring at Rachel's legs. I would pull on her skirt and give them a little more to look at. The next one was a fast song, but Rachel and I stayed on the floor and danced. I knew this would get to Julia since I never danced fast songs with her. It was followed by another slow one, and I grabbed Rachel and held her tight. I slid my hands down one time and squeezed her butt. She just smiled at me. At the end of the song, I walked her back to my table and told her maybe we could dance again later. Rachel replied, "I would like that." Steve had just returned to our table also. He danced with one of the other gals who was there at the same table with Rachel. I was sipping my drink, and Steve looked up and said, "Here comes a nice-looking woman." He had never met Julia, but that's who was coming to our table. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. I looked over at Steve as though she was talking to him. "Ryan, answer me." I stood up and said, "It would be a pleasure." I looked over at Steve and said, "Steve, meet Julia, my ex-wife." Steve's mouth dropped open, remembering he had just called her a nice-looking woman. As we were dancing, Julia said, "What was that all about? She was all over you. God, she would have screwed you on the dance floor if you would have asked her. Isn't that why we're divorced? You wanted me to screw other women so you could have other men?" I asked. "Ryan, please, you and I never did talk about it. I was wrong. Look, Julia, you came home with other men's juices running out of you like a faucet, and all you can say is I was wrong. Maybe I should screw that little filly, and then I can say I was wrong too. Besides, we're not married now. When you went on your sex spree, you were my wife." My wife, damn it! Some guy came up to Julia and me on the dance floor and asked Julia what she was doing. "You're supposed to be my date, and you asked this guy to dance?" he asked. I looked at this weasel and said, "Screw off, buddy. You're not getting any off Julia tonight." I could tell it really embarrassed Julia. "Who the hell are you, her husband or something?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm her husband, and you're going to be in the hospital if you don't get the hell away from us." Julia started to talk when I interrupted her. "Do you want to sit with me or go back to your boyfriend here?" Julia was steaming mad and pulled away from me and went back to her table. I grabbed the creep by the arm and told him if he tried having sex with her that night, I would hunt him down and kill him. Then I let go of his arm as he went back to his table. The two young women we danced with earlier came over and sat with us. We switched over to a booth and were feeling them up. I normally don't treat women like this, but Julia had a bird's-eye view, and I was putting it on pretty thick. These gals were there for one reason that night, and that was to get laid. The little blonde I was with asked if we were ready to leave. She told us she was hot and horny. I asked her to do me a favor first. I pointed over to Julia, who was sitting there looking really mad in our direction, and I asked her to go over and tell that woman that she was going to get her wish that evening. The little blonde smiled and walked over and told Julia what I had said and then came back. Julia was furious and tried to get up but was trapped between some other people. By the time she got up, we were gone. We did have sex with these two hot chicks at Steve's apartment. In fact, throughout the night, we even changed partners. The sex was great, but after they left the next morning, I didn't feel complete. I knew what it was the love was missing. I had turned off my cell phone, and when I turned it on, I had 10 messages from Julia. She was under the collar. She called me every name in the book. One of her messages said I ruined her evening. That made me feel good. It was about 9 in the morning when I called her. She answered the phone, and I asked her if she had calmed down any. She began ranting and raving again, saying what a bastard I was and how much I hurt her. Then all of a sudden, she stopped. How does it feel, Julia, to know the one you love is screwing someone else? It's the life you chose. You screw who you want, and I'll screw who I want. To hell with love. I could hear her crying as I hung up the phone. I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks. Then one day she called. Ryan, can we talk? I mean about everything. I know it will hurt you because seeing you with that bimbo hurt me, so I know what I did was much worse. Julia, it's over now. Go on with your life and screw who you want. I don't care anymore. I just wanted you to get a taste of how it felt. Ryan, I haven't had sex with a man in 2.5 years. The last time was a month after you left me. It wasn't all that good, and there was no love. I realized that it was just men using me as a whore. I'm not a whore, Ryan. I was wrong, I was really wrong, and there's no way I can prove it to you. I wanted to try and explain it to you, but that type of life is not for me. I realized it when James asked me if I was his little slut. I slapped him hard across the face. He wouldn't hit me back, but I kicked him in the balls before he had a chance. I don't want that life, Ryan. I want the life that we once had. Honest, 2.5 years? What about that idiot a couple of weeks ago? He said he was your date. He had every intention of bedding you down. He was friends with one of the guys at our table. The other men at the table were with their wives. Since I was the only single woman at the table, he assumed he was going to be with me. I had no intention of doing anything other than maybe dancing with him. Besides, he told me you were going to kill him if he laid a hand on me. Did you tell him that? I sure did. Do I have to follow up on my threat? Hell no, he wouldn't even dance with me. The only reason I went back to the table was that you embarrassed me so badly. Then you sent that bimbo over to let me know you were going to have sex with her. Did you, Ryan? Did you have sex with her? Julia, we're not married. I'm free to do what I want. By the way, whatever happened to your friend Emma? I don't see her with you anymore. They don't belong to the club anymore. She and her husband are divorced. The reason they tried swapping was that they thought it would add a little lust into their marriage. Her husband ended up divorcing her, and he and the other man's wife left together. 2 more marriages went down in flames. I thought it was odd she mentioned the club. She mentioned she hasn't gone there for years. I thought I would change the subject. How are the wedding plans for Sophie coming along? You haven't told me much about them, and now it's only a few months away, I asked. I know you know all the plans. Sophie has talked to you a dozen times. I guess I felt you didn't want to be over here alone with me, so that's why we made the plans and just let you verify them. I'm not afraid to be alone with you, Julia, I said. Oh yeah? I don't believe you. If you're not afraid of me, then take me out on a date, she laughed. I don't think that would be a good idea, Julia. It may give the wrong impression. People might think we were getting back together, I replied. I knew you were afraid. You still love me like I love you. You just won't admit it, she said. Julia, I do love you, but the hurt of what you did to me is still there. I see it every time I look at you. When you cheated on me, you took a big part of my heart away. I don't think it's mended yet. I don't know if it will ever be. God, I'm so sorry, and there is nothing I can do. Nothing, Ryan. I'm the one who ruined our marriage. I'm the one who lost the only man I ever loved. I'm also living daily with the guilt. I've thought time and time again about taking my own life, but it's the kids that would have to live with that. I've done enough damage to them. I was hoping that one day, maybe, just maybe, we might get back together. I didn't know what to think anymore. I never had talked to her, and now I hear this. God, my mind was in turmoil. I wanted her. I loved her. I hated what she did to me and to our marriage. What if she followed up on her thoughts? Was she laying a guilt trip on me? I had to know more before I believed her. I knew I couldn't live with it if she would take her own life. I thought I knew her well enough to know if she was lying to me, but I don't know anymore. I had to find out for sure, but how? We all have thoughts like that once in a while. Thank God we don't follow through on them. I had to say something to her, but what? Julia, I'm getting hungry. Care to join me at the Red Lobster for lunch? We could discuss what we'll give Sophie for a wedding present. All I heard for the next 30 seconds was crying. Then a tiny voice said, I would love to. Now, Julia, you have to understand that this isn't for sex. It's lunch and a little talk about Sophie's wedding. I understand. I could almost hear her smiling. I stopped by to pick her up, and she was standing on the porch waiting. God, she was beautiful, dressed up in a nice dress that showed ample legs. I pulled up, and she came almost running to the car. She got in and just smiled. We talked about generalities, avoiding the heavy stuff. She told me she had bought a dress for the wedding. She told me I would better get measured for a tux. I knew I had to wear one, but I don't think any guy looks forward to it. Without thinking, I asked Julia if she would go with me to see how I looked in one. I hadn't worn one since our wedding almost 20 years ago. She looked surprised, and so was I. It just came out. I was so used to asking her opinion when we were married. Yes, I would love to come with you. Just let me know when, she said. I could hardly take it back, so I told her the following Saturday would be fine. I would have to watch myself. I could get myself into trouble here. We were seated at the table, and we both ordered iced tea. We always ordered the same stuff. We had so much in common. Julia, I need to ask you something, but I really have to know the truth. I promise after you answer, we will never discuss the topic again. Did you mean it when you talked about taking your own life? She looked at me with a tear in her eyes. Don't worry, I won't cry. I've done that enough in the last 4 years. In answer to your question, yes, I did. I told you I went out once after you left me. I know this is going to sound really stupid, but I did it for revenge against you. Revenge against me? I don't understand. I was all mixed up, confused, and felt abandoned by you. I know it wasn't your fault at all, but at the time, I wasn't thinking rationally. So, I went out again to get even with you. I wasn't enjoying it at all, and that's when I got up to leave, and he called me his slut. I slapped and kicked him and came home crying. The kids were already in bed, and I just felt my life was over. I went in and got the whole bottle of sleeping pills and was about to take them when Lily asked if she could sleep with me. She told me she needed me. I started crying with my little girl asleep in my arms. That's when I prayed to Almighty God for help. A calmness came over me, and I decided my kids needed me, and just maybe you would see the change in my life and want me back. She brought tears to my eyes. Luckily, our meals came, and we changed the subject and started eating. Afterward, I asked her if she wanted to go to a movie. We found a good comedy so we could both laugh. I took her back home, and she asked me if I wanted to come in. I told her not then. I had a lot of thinking to do. Before she got out of the car, she leaned over and kissed me. I didn't stop her. She felt so good, like she belonged there. I love you, Ryan. Just remember that. She got out without me saying anything and went into the house. Something just didn't fit. She told me twice now that she did the swap thing only one more time, a month after I left her. I wanted to believe her, but the puzzle pieces didn't fit. For one thing, if you go to a swap club, you have to have a partner. Who was hers? It couldn't be this James fellow because that's who she swapped to be with. Where was her man when she was fighting off this James fellow? Then the possible suicide she said time and time again, yet she only told me about the sleeping pills. I wanted to believe her, but I needed answers. My biggest problem was where she went every month and with whom. For over 2 years, the kids never mentioned meeting anybody. Maybe she was being honest with me, and I was being paranoid. All our free time was spent getting ready for Sophie's wedding. I did have lunch with Julia, Sophie, my son Leo, and Sophie's fiancé, John. We were headed over to be fitted for our tuxes. I swear I looked like a penguin, but Sophie and Julia both said I looked handsome. Time flew by so fast, and before I knew it, it was time for the wedding rehearsal. I went over to the church and did all the things I was asked to do, no big deal. As Sophie and I walked down the aisle, I did some silly things like hopping and skipping. Nothing bad, just having a little fun. I remember the pastor saying that it would be different the following day. We might be nervous, so we should try to remember our parts. I thought, yeah, walk down the aisle and later say her mother and I. Wow, I thought, who couldn't do that? Afterward, we all went to the restaurant and ate. I made sure I went. It was something that I didn't have to pay for. Before I left to go home, Julia came up to me. I had hardly said much to her that evening. Ryan, I'll see you tomorrow. It was something about the way she said it, and I leaned over and kissed her. I don't know why, but I did. Maybe it was the joyousness of the occasion. I can't really say. She smiled at me, and I left. I was at the church early, just like I was told. The bridesmaids and ushers were all there. People started arriving. I was starting to get a little jittery. Julia was being escorted to the front row. She looked so beautiful. I've never seen her more radiant as she smiled at me. "How's my penguin today?" She laughed lightly. "He's scared shitless. His daughter is getting married, and his wife never looked more beautiful," I replied. I realized what I said after I said it. It was true. I've never seen her more beautiful. "It's okay, honey. Everything will work out fine. You'll do fine. Just don't walk on Sophie's dress." She smiled at me. I headed out to the back of the church and waited for Sophie. When I saw her coming to be by my side, I started crying. She looked like a younger version of Julia. "It's okay, Daddy. We can do this. Mom told me to tell you she loves you and not to step on my dress." It made me chuckle, so much like her mother. I got a little ping hoping Sophie wouldn't be totally like her mother. My little girl was getting married. The music started, and the bridesmaids and flower girl and everyone else had made their entrance. "Well, Dad, here we go," Sophie said as we entered the sanctuary of the church. We started our walk down the aisle. I kept telling myself, "Don't step on Sophie's dress." My eyes were filled with tears as I walked my little girl down the aisle. This was what life was all about: love and family and friends. We made it down to the front of the church with half the people with tears of joy in their eyes. Thank God I wasn't the only one. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the pastor asked. What was my line? "Her mother and I said. I turned to sit next to Julia, and she was both smiling and crying. I whispered to Julia, "I screwed up. One stupid line, and I screwed it up." "Everything is fine, honey." "You did great," Julia whispered. Through the whole service, I was holding Julia's hand, probably to the point of hurting her. She didn't say a word. She just sat there smiling and crying. I was glad when that service was over. Then we had to stand around for pictures and whatever else they do. Then it was time for the reception. I needed a drink and went and got one. Everyone was having a good time. Sophie and John made a nice couple. People were saying it was so nice to see me and Julia together. Every time I heard it, Julia just smiled, never saying a word. The dancing began, and they had the father of the bride dance. I guided Julia onto the floor and started dancing. People started clapping for us. I looked around at all our kids smiling. I looked over at my mom and dad, and they both gave me a thumbs up. It looked like everyone was sure about us but me. After the wedding, Julia asked me if I would drive her home. Of course, I said yes. When we got to the house, she asked me if I was coming in. I answered, saying the kids would be home shortly, and I didn't want them to get the wrong idea. They already have the wrong idea. They went home with your mom and dad and will be sleeping at their house. The only place for you to sleep tonight is in my bed or Leos, Julia replied. Are you going to open my door for me? She smiled. I decided, what the hell, she wanted me, and so I decided to follow my heart. I wanted to make sure I didn't propose or anything. I still had too many unanswered questions. I got out and walked her to the door. I opened it, and she told me to come in. Ryan, you don't need to marry me tonight. Maybe the time will come, and maybe it won't. I do want you to make love to me tonight just like you used to. I refused the offer to spend the night with her, saying that it's not the right time. I, however, did spend a few hours with her chatting over a cup of coffee. She told me about her current life, and how she has not been with a lover since we got divorced. I told her that I am not ready to be back with her, and I need more time. Ryan, I'm not going to push you, and am not going to rush you, but I will always be here for you as long as it takes. I smiled at Julia and left the house. I didn't even kiss her goodbye on purpose. I wanted her to know that I wasn't ready yet. I now had a new problem to ponder. Julia said that she's been without a lover for almost 4 years now. Somehow, my heart refused to believe everything was too nice, fit together too easy. For over 2 years, Julia never said anything about getting back together. In the last year, she was throwing herself at me. I needed to know more. When I got back to Mom and Dad's, everyone had left. Dad asked me if everything was okay because I seemed out of sorts. I explained to him that something wasn't right, and I needed to find out what. Even though it was Sunday, I called Sarah, my lawyer. I explained the situation, and she thought it was odd also. She told me not to say anything for a couple of days. She had a private investigator who would find out what was going on. Julia called on Monday and asked me over for dinner. I told her that I was busy and would take a rain check. I had some business to take care of. I didn't tell her I was getting antsy trying to put 2 and 2 together, and kept coming out with 5. On Thursday, Sarah called me at work and asked me to get to her office as soon as possible. She said it was extremely important. I asked for the rest of the day off and went to see Sarah. When I got there, Sarah told me things I didn't want to hear. I was right about Julia. She belonged to a swap club, and her partner was Lucas, her lawyer. It seems that after I walked out, Lucas decided to take my place. Julia never decided to quit her lifestyle but hide it from me. I asked Sarah, why was she coming back after me in the last year? She had her freedom and her life. Why bother me? It's all about money, Ryan. In the last 4 years, she has borrowed from the home loan to the tune of $80,000. Instead of owing the $70,000, you now owe $135,000, said Sarah. How did she get it? Didn't she need my signature to borrow money against the house? I asked. No. When you settled on the credit cards, one was a cash equity loan. You could borrow continually on it to a specified sum. Yours is almost there now. Your friend Lucas slipped that one past us. There was no way of telling once you agreed to pay the credit loans. I'm sorry, Ryan. I should have watched that after the divorce was final. We don't usually do a follow-up unless asked, and of course, Lucas wasn't going to ask. Sarah, when I went to her place, I did use the washroom, and I did check through the cabinets for her prescription drugs. There weren't any, so I called the doctor, and he told me he never wrote a prescription for sleeping pills in the last 4 years and that Julia has been there for all her physicals. He said she was actually coming every 3 months instead of 6. I asked if she asked to be tested for any sexually transmitted diseases, and he told me she had the test done and is clean. Thank God for at least that, I thought. By me paying the medical bills, I was at least able to find out this stuff. Well, Sarah, what do we do now? I asked. The only debt you incurred is the house. Well, put a lien on it for $3,000, and if she ever tries to sell it, you'll get that part of the equity. The rest is a loss to you. As far as the kids go, 2 are already out of the house. The other 2 are old enough to decide if they want to live with your ex-wife, with you, or your parents. We will leave that up to them. Ryan, since you told me you will be leaving the state, you will probably be out of the picture. I'm sure they would want to finish the last years of their schooling here. Thanks for everything, Sarah. I guess it's all up to me now. Please call and put the freeze on the equity on the house. If the kids choose to live with my mom and dad, I'll need you to transfer the child support payment to my parents. I went home and talked to my mom and dad. I told them both that I could never go back to Julia, even though my dad already knew. I explained it as though he didn't. Julia cheated on me, and I hoped she had given up that lifestyle, but she hadn't. If she would have been honest with me, we might have been able to work things out. I knew my parents were deeply hurt, but they needed to know the truth. I stopped by Julia's house while she was at work. I came right out and told the kids the truth. Their mom had cheated on me. I didn't tell them about swapping and the like. I tried to give her time to change, but she never did. I thought we had a chance at the wedding but found out she was still lying to me. I could never live with her or trust her again. It just wasn't possible to forgive anymore. Now I had to tell them I was leaving the state. They could come with me, stay with their mom, or live with their grandparents. Both of the younger kids said they would stay with their mom. Even though she might have boyfriends, she never brought them to the house. Lily told me she never saw strange men at the house. About the only one to visit other than relatives was Lucas. They've known him for years. I didn't have the heart to tell them Lucas was one of her lovers. They all cried, saying they would miss me, but I explained that I would only be 5 hours away. If they needed me, they would also be welcome to come and visit me anytime. When are you leaving, Dad? Asked Leo. Next week. Once I get settled in, I'll give you my address and phone number. I love all of you and will help you any way I can. I called Julia at work. It was something I had never done. Julia, I'll meet you at the cafe. I need to talk with you away from the kids. She told me she got off work in an hour and would be there. I know she must have thought her plan worked, and we would be getting back together. When she got there, I began our talk. Julia, I've been doing a lot of thinking because of Sophie's wedding and me starting to have conversations with you. Everyone is thinking we're getting back together. It's all going too fast for me. Do you know that no one knows why we got divorced in the first place? I look back on your life for the last 4 years. Where's the hurt, the pain that I felt when I discovered your cheating? There wasn't any. Sure, your financial situation hurt some, but that was about it. She looked at me a little concerned. I continued, having coffee with you that night together was one of the best nights for me in years. Yet I cannot get past the fact that you were without a lover in over 2 years. Why did you lie to me? You had your girls' night out every month. It seems that the women you were with from work and your book club were also swap club members. So, I guess you've been getting your sex in after all. She started in on her crying again. You screwing other men caused our divorce, and you never stopped doing it. Go ahead, explain it. Go home and tell your kids why I left in the first place. Tell them your needs aren't being met, and that I'm not good enough to satisfy you. They deserve to know and are old enough to handle it. I've talked to them. God, Ryan, surely you didn't tell them about me, did you? She asked. It's always about you, isn't it, Julia? Never about your kids or me. I told them you had an affair and cheated on me. Ryan, I'm so sorry. You left me. What could I do? I'm a woman and need to be loved. You don't want love. What I did the other night was love. What you want is unlimited orgasms with unlimited sex partners. Did you think I would never find out? How stupid do you think I am? I had wondered what if we got married and then I caught you cheating again. Then it hit me your lover Lucas was behind this setup. Lucas? How did you find out about Lucas? Oh my God, what have I done? What have you done? You ruined a lot of lives, including your own. You gave up a man who truly loved you and was almost ready to go back to you. You have lost the respect of your kids, even though they will still live with you. You've hurt them all deeply. You lie, you cheat, and now you want to steal from me also. The love I had for you is still there but buried deep in my heart. All I see now is a conniving woman who will have sex with anything that walks. A couple of years from now, I want you to think about what could have been. Your looks will fade, and your kids will be gone, and so will the money. I guess you will still have a bunch of old sex friends and, of course, Lucas. I doubt if he'll stay around with a poor woman. She was crying hard now. Ryan, I really do love you. Please stay with me. You'll go to therapy or whatever you want. I turned to her and said, I forgot to tell you. I'm moving out of state and leaving next week. You really are good in bed, but of course, you know that as well as God knows how many men. Goodbye, Julia. Have a nice life. I knew Lucas was behind this setup. If I had gotten remarried, then that meant I would have accepted her lifestyle, and our old marriage agreement would be void. She and Lucas were playing me for the last year because of the money. She was already down 80,000 and deep in debt again, but was living the same as she always did. It must mean she had run up a hell of a debt. Such a stupid woman. I finally moved on with my life. It hurt for a while, but I was putting it all behind me. Did I love Julia? Of course I did, but her wrongdoing was just too much. It's been a few years now, and I met someone. She was a few years younger than me, beautiful, articulate, and funny. She told me she was divorced. She had 2 kids that were barely teenagers. When I asked her what caused her divorce, she said a cheating husband. He wanted the so-called good life, you know, that included other people's style. It wasn't for me. I'm a one-guy kind of woman. I also have to think about what's best for my kids. I told him to go find a woman who thinks like that, but it wasn't me. We dated for about a year, and I asked her to marry me. She looked up at me and asked what the marriage vows meant to me. To love, honor, and cherish till death do us part, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to make love only to her and none other. I can do all that except the cherish part, I laughed. She knew my story and about my alphabet kids and had to laugh. You see, her son was named Adam, and her daughter was Faith. We were married, and all my kids attended the wedding. At first, they were reluctant to attend. I had them come up before the wedding, and they met my future wife face to face. They saw the kind, gentle person that I saw, Of course, Sophie and Leo were both married already, and Lily was dating. Ethan and Lily were both still in college. They knew I needed someone in my life. Mom and Dad drove up for the wedding also. They fell in love with my bride-to-be also. They knew my life was back on track. My wife looked beautiful, petite, and sexy as hell. Why any man would want to share her was beyond me. We went on a short honeymoon and stopped by Mom and Dad's on the way back. I showed my new wife the town I was from and the house I used to live in. Julia had to sell it because of her debts. I did get $30,000 out of it, thanks to Sarah, my lawyer. We headed back home and began our new life. It was a simple life, but we were happy with it. We did enjoy it to the fullest, and our lovemaking was terrific. We had only one problem, but we were able to solve it. You see, my new wife's name was Bethany. I remember her looking at me and telling me we had to do something about that. She didn't want me to call her Beth, so we decided on Honey. She told me she didn't care what everyone else called her, but she didn't want to hear anything but the word honey from my lips. I remember asking if I could call her sweetheart once in a while. She smiled and said that would be okay too. When we make love, you can call me anything you want but Beth, she laughed. I don't know what Julia is doing anymore. I did remove her from my life. The kids see her and say she lives in an apartment alone. They said she seems to be doing okay. As far as dating goes, they think she does but doesn't really talk about it. They said she cried when she heard I was getting married. Of course, they love their mom and do watch after her. She'll be alright, they said. I just hope she gave up some of the wildlife. I guess I'll never know. I remember the last thing she said to me. Ryan, I really do love you and want you to know that I will wait for you. I know you'll come back to me. You'll be here for as long as it takes. My answer to her was, forever is a long time to wait. Ryan moved on after betrayal, but could you forgive and forget in his place? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.